Chapter 23. Chloe and Gunther. "Valentine Mandalay," the woman Val called Chloe said. She lifted her boot off the neck of the man she had floored, gave him a light kick in the rear, and let him scramble away. With her staff set to the side, she locked in a long embrace with Val, while Haille and Caitlin looked on. Cody was next, exchanging an equally long hug with her. "I should have known the two of you were in the thick of this," she smiled. "Balthazar, fresh drinks for all our remaining guests." The man with the star-shaped scar put aside the broom he was using to sweep up the shards of broken goblets and went to the kegs on the far side of the room to pour fresh drinks. Chloe righted a few chairs and invited them to sit down close to the fire. "Chloe, this is Prince Haille Hillborn of Andis, and Caitlin Hunnebray, his close friend." "Prince, you jest." When Val shook his head that he did not, Chloe stood and made a shallow bow. "Well, your highness, I am Chloe Amberson. Welcome to the bird and the baby." She glanced to Val once more. "This is really the prince." Haille cleared his throat. "I'm indebted to Val and Cody. They have been loyal friends and champions." "I think I need to sit down," Chloe said, then stopped herself, looking to Haille, who was still standing. "Please, be at ease," Haille said, pulling out a seat for Caitlin and one for himself. Chloe took a seat. "Val, you travel with some high-born companions these days." "Strange days call for unlikely friendships. Prince Haille, Chloe is a member of the Order of Oban. She is a knight like myself," Val said. "Was," Chloe corrected. A cloud of sadness passed across Val's face. "Chloe was my right hand during the wars of Islay." "I thought Cody was your right hand," Caitlin said, taking a fresh cup of cider from Balthazar. "I'm the left," Cody said, seated in the corner where Misty had found her way to his lap. Chloe did not hesitate to show her disapproval. "Misty, get cleaning and leave him alone. He's got bastard children all over the realm." Misty's smile turned into a scowl, and she joined Balthazar and now Gunther, who were straightening the tables and chairs. Chloe swept an arm in their direction. "This is my husband," she said. Haille expected Balthazar to come over next, one warrior paired with another, but to his surprise it was Gunther the magician who came over and reached out a hand in greeting. "We loved your tricks," Caitlin said. "You are a talented illusionist," Val said. "You are kind," Gunther said, his cheeks turning a rosy pink. "He is no illusionist," Chloe said. "He is a true sorcerer." "Truly?" Val asked. "My wife is generous. I have much practice left before I can offer my services to anyone," he said, running his hand through his thinning hair. "But I try." Haille could see a powerful mix of pride and affection in Chloe's face as she looked at her husband. Such affection he might not have expected from a warrioress like Chloe, but he was quickly learning that people had depths that could surprise him. "You didn't want to use your powers to settle the scuffle in here?" Val asked. Chloe snorted. "Be glad he didn't. He likely would have killed or maimed us all." Haille saw Caitlin's eyebrows go up. "I'm still learning to restrain my powers. There are few mages to learn from here in Pinky's Port, so I'm mostly self-taught." "Remarkable," Val said. While Chloe and Val spoke, Gunther excused himself to continue helping Balthazar and Misty straighten the tavern. Haille watched him with wonder, curious to see if he might use his powers to clean spills or right furniture. But Gunther seemed content to use ordinary rags and just his hands for the time being. Val and Chloe spoke for hours, the fire dying to embers and Caitlin slumping in her chair until her head nodded onto Haille's shoulder. At some point, Cody and Misty wandered off together, but both Chloe and Val were too engaged to notice. Even Gunther excused himself for bed, and Balthazar went home for the night. Haille struggled to remain awake and attentive out of politeness. Val shared all the details of their adventures so far with Chloe, not just their true identities, but also Lorna's premonition, their mission, and even the mysteries they had encountered in Sidon. Vorgs and elves, Chloe said, sipping the dregs of her cider. Extraordinary. The coals in their fireplace smoldered. The hour was long past midnight. The street outside was quiet. Haille wondered what Sapphire, Azure, and Adamantus were doing. Cyan was nestled in a rafter in the corner of the room. Val lowered his gaze to meet Chloe's eyes and said, Chloe, I need you. You should join us. Chloe's brown eyes gleamed in the light of the fireplace. She met his gaze without blinking. Val, you left us. I wanted you all to lead a regular life, not one on the run. No, Val, don't hide behind your honor. You're scared. Your order disbanded, everything falling apart around you. You were afraid we would leave you too. So you left us first. Val rubbed his face with his hands. I was afraid you all would die or be captured following a failed ideal. Many of us were captured or died anyway. Twenge made sure of that. Val swallowed. It's my worst nightmare and my greatest paradox. The longer I served with you and the men, the more I thought you family. The less I could bear anything happening to you. Haille thought back to how Val had frozen on the bridge over the river and remembered Cody's words. He cares too much. You panicked. You would freeze, Chloe said, her voice flat. You knew. We all knew. I was weak, no longer fit to lead, to be followed. That was up to us to decide. You denied us that. I froze on the bridge just days ago when we saw Twenge. So, you think it won't happen again? That things will be as they were? No. Actually, I'm sure it will happen again, which is why I need you. If something were to happen to me, this mission is a farce. We're well past our prime. That hasn't stopped Cody. He wouldn't let you leave him if you tried. Val laughed. By the stars, I tried. I'm sure you did. But I've come to realize how much I need him. How much I need you. Gunther, too. She readjusted herself in her chair. She sat in it backwards, her forearms crossed over its back. Gunther isn't one of us. It's one of the reasons I love him. He's not going to run off on some idealist quest to right the world's wrongs. How can you be sure? Every man needs a mission to measure himself up against, a trial to prove himself. He's happy. We're happy. He must feel wasted here. What you are suggesting is too dangerous. Now who is afraid of loss? Val, we're not young anymore, not as foolhardy, not as idealistic. You're right, there is something valuable in stability. Val was quiet, looking into the glowing mound of coals, his jaw working. Say something, Val. I guess I feel stable surrounded by my team. My left hand and my right, that's all. But things change. He placed his flagon down on the floor, stood up to stretch, then without further words stepped outside, the sailcloth curtain swaying behind him. Haille was prepared to leave Chloe to her thoughts, but Caitlin, whom he thought asleep, spoke up. It's hard for you. Chloe looked up, the side of her face twitching. Hard how? To be torn between honor and love, friend and husband? Or maybe you mean scratching out a living in a small edge of the kingdom port town. Or perhaps you must mean being a woman, where every man feels he is entitled. Caitlin grew quiet, stung by the sharpness of Chloe's words. She frowned down into her lap. Well, which is it? Chloe asked. Maybe all those things, Caitlin finally volunteered. Chloe let out a bitter laugh. Likely, she said, standing up. She let out a curse when she realized Misty and Cody had both gone missing, then turned back to Haille and Caitlin. Come, I'll show you where you can sleep. You'll want to stay here a few days until the next ship to Kerith City sails. In the meantime, you will earn your keep. When Misty turns up, Caitlin, you will help her. Prince Haille, even a prince might have to play the part of itinerant worker. I'm ready to, Haille said. Know your way around a boat? He nodded, even if he didn't. Gunther will need help tomorrow on the water. The sunfish are schooling. Haille was not sure what that meant, but he was eager for any time spent with Gunther. "I'm happy to help. You might not feel the same when we wake you up before dawn tomorrow. Come, follow me." Gunther shook Haille awake before dawn. Haille was not even sure he had slept more than 3 hours, but he shuffled across the tiny bedroom, dressed, and wrapped himself in his cloak against the chill of the night. The stars were still visible low down on the horizon, and the village was quiet but for a few figures moving through the darkness in the direction of the docks. These were other fishermen, who acknowledged one another with nods and simple short greetings. "Morn." Haille was slow and sluggish, and nearly missed a step boarding the Sunchime, Gunther's modest fishing skiff, but Gunther was there to catch hold of him and help him settle on a thwart. "It would not do if I lost the Prince of Antis overboard," he said, taking a seat next to the tiller. "Let me tell you, I never imagined having you as a sailing companion." "I never pictured myself as a fisherman's apprentice, but your wife is persuasive," Haille said, knowing in his heart that little persuasion had been needed. "She is a force to be reckoned with, aye," he said, unfurling the sail and catching a gentle breeze that carried them out to sea. "Is it strange to have people from Chloe's past appear out of nowhere?" "The past is always with us, I'd say. I'm glad of her training. It has settled more than one scuffle in the tavern, and I'm proud of her service." "And Val, what do you reckon of him?" "A good man, an experienced adventurer, whose heart grew too big for his art." "He went soft. At least that is what he fears," Haille said. "I heard him say as much to Chloe last night." "I'd say he did, but saved himself in the process. What are most warriors left with but nightmares and emptiness in the end? Val can at least say he fought for life and truly protected those who were in need of it." "I guess I had not looked at it that way." "Val realized who his family was, the men and women around him, and realized he could not risk them any more, especially when those handing down orders became morally lost. That was what Chloe said to me. I'd expect as much from a man who had searched for the right fight all his life, to protect life rather than destroy it. It's what sets Chloe apart, too. I love her for it. Here, help me with these," Gunther said, handing Haille a tangle of nets. They did not leave sight of the shore, which was a relief to Haille, the Sunchime being a small craft. The eastern sky was lightening with dawn when they reached the fishing grounds, and Gunther cast the nets over the side. There was waiting after that. Even though there was bait to prepare, Haille nodded off, rocked into a doze by the gentle rhythm of the waves and wind. Sapphire, perched on top of the mast, tucked her head under her wing and slept as well. Haille startled awake when the wind picked up and the Sunchime tipped against a sizable wave. He caught himself on the gunwale. "Good morning. Did you have a fine sleep?" Gunther smiled. "I did. Sorry, I have not been much help so far." "Well, pull this net in with me and we'll call it even." The net was heavy with its catch, and Haille was afraid the tiny boat would capsize as they hauled the shining silverfish aboard. But Gunther proved to be an able seaman and kept the ship steady. They dumped the catch into barrels next to the mast. "Not a bad catch," Gunther said, slapping the side of the barrels. Haille was relieved when Gunther brought out a bag of raisin bread and cold tea for breakfast. His stomach had been growling painfully, but he was unsure if it would have been rude to complain. After all, he did not want to seem like a spoiled royal, even if he had slept through most of the morning. The food invigorated him, and he helped more on the next hauls, anticipating where he would be needed, moving in sync with Gunther in order to keep the boat from capsizing. They filled the first barrel and the second halfway before casting the net once more. By now, the sun was up over the horizon and sparkling on the water. Here on the sea in the gusting breeze, under a clear blue sky of late autumn, it was hard to believe there was strife anywhere in the kingdoms, the realm, and the wider world. While they waited on the next catch, Gunther began a song, a ballad about an audacious young man who sought to impress a princess by capturing death. But once death was captured and trapped in chains, the world turned to chaos. Butchered animals would not die, vegetables would not cook, but instead bloomed in pots of hot water. With eternity drawing out interminably before them, people became lethargic and apathetic. Gunther cut the song short when he realized the nets were full, and Haille stepped towards the gunwale to help again. The last barrel filled and the sun 2 hand widths from the horizon, Gunther leaned on the tiller and turned them back to Pinky's port. Haille found himself wondering what happened to the audacious suitor who had deigned to capture death. Gunther smiled. He wed the princess, but not without first releasing death and being humbled. Haille wondered if this was the opening to speak of lore, magic, and other things of the occult that were so forbidden in Antis but tolerated in Kerith. He listened as the waves slapped against the boat, the sail snapped in the breeze, and fish flopped in the barrel. Gunther, how did you know you had the gift for magic? Quite by accident, really. My mother said I was charming the contents out of goblets and flagons even as a child, throwing up water spouts into the air and trying to catch them with my hands. I barely remember it except for my mother, scolding me not to do so when I was in public. So afraid was I never did after that. I nearly forgot I had the talent, until one day when I was older, 7 or so, and my younger sister fell face down into a rain barrel. She could not get out, and I was too small to reach over and pull her out. I grew desperate. Then, just when I was on the edge of panic, the barrel exploded from within, water rushing out, blasting the staves apart. My sister sat coughing in the midst of what was left of the barrel. For me, I was old enough to realize the water had obeyed me, that it was obedient to my will. That's amazing. Not unheard of, though. It is not unusual for some with the gift to have an element they are more dominant with. Earth, wind, water, or fire. For me it was water, and wind a close second. This being Kerith, there was less need for me to hide my gifts. I could do illusions to entertain, but I lacked real teachers of magic. You didn't travel abroad to seek them. Never had the chance, not yet at least. So I practice myself. I'm making slow progress. It was now or never, Haille thought. He put a hand on the gunwale to steady himself, and recounted what he had seen in the tunnel leading to the font of Jasmine, how Sade had conjured flame from his fingertips, and how Haille had diverted the gush of flames around him by repeating some of Sade's own words. Splendid, Gunther said, leaning forward as if forgetting the tiller altogether when Haille finished. Have you ever had any indication that you had the gift before? No, not really, Haille said, surprised at how easily he spoke of it now, how eager he had been to share his secret. Here, Gunther said, moving to sit beside Haille on the thwart. Repeat after me. He cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was clear, his cadence almost a chant. Magzine morphus lum. Magzine morphus lum. Albraith trulit. Albraith trulit. Then the binding word is 9. 9. The sunshine rocked forward as a breeze filled the sail and they bounced over the waves as if pulled by horses. Sapphire fluttered off the mast, losing her balance in the sudden onrush of wind. She twirled and tweeted in the air overhead. Haille grabbed hold of the thwart and gunwale. Did I do that? You did. They rode the Zephyr, as Gunther called it, for a few more minutes before he calmed it with a wide sweep of his hands and a short chant under his breath as they neared the shore. We don't want to catch the attention of the other fishermen. Of course, Haille said. The drowsiness of the morning was gone, and his head was racing with the possibilities and mysteries of magic. Unfortunately, he kept coming back to the same sobering realization. Magic was outlawed in Antis by his own ancestor. Where would he learn? Who would he learn from? As a king's son, was there anything he could do? He asked as much aloud.
Try and change things, Gunther said. After all, you are royalty.
He had not given it much thought, had not even considered himself someone people might listen to. After all, he was the freakish, crippled prince. But Gunther went on.
I'm sure the elves would like it much if an ancestor of Hilary Hellborn tried to fix the lies and deceit he was known for.
Yes, maybe they would, Haille said, the Olden's face coming to mind. They rode in silence, occupied with their own thoughts as they approached the docks. Haille experienced a sinking feeling in his gut that was not from the rocking of the waves when he saw a stout man waiting on the pier for them. He had a feather pinned to his lapel, and his arms crossed over his chest. Behind him waited a half-dozen men, many of which Haille recognized from the brawl the night before, including Conrad, the chain connecting nose ring to earring gleaming like a golden smile.
Uh-oh,
Gunther said, riding the tiller. He called out to the man with the feathered lapel.
Mr. Brisby, what a pleasure. What brings you quayside today?
This writ, he said, unrolling a piece of parchment covered in long lines of swirling writing. Your payments on the loan for your boat are overdue. Gunther stood upright as he could in the stern of the Sunchime and handed the mooring line to Haille, who jumped to the dock and heaved the boat against the wooden pylons.
Mr. Brisby,
Gunther said, dabbing at the sweat beading on his forehead.
My payments are due on the last day of the month.
That has changed. All payments are due on the 1st now, so you are late. Some of the men behind Brisby chuckled.
You know, with the unrest in the south, all businesses are feeling the strain, Gunther said.
You've still been catching fish each day.
And giving half of what I catch to refugees.
The bank does not deal in charity, Brisby said, snapping his fingers. One of the hired men behind him shoved Haille aside, took the mooring line of the Sunchime, and held it steady as the others stepped into the wobbling craft. This is property of the bank now, Brisby said.
And this is for that bitch wife of yours,
Conrad said, punching Gunther in the gut, then shoving him overboard. Gunther hit the water with a splash that attracted the attention of his fellow fishermen, who were bringing in their catch. What are you looking at? Brisby spat. Be that a lesson to any and all of you who are late on your payments and decide to be charitable. Gunther bobbed in the harbor, wiping his face of water or tears or both. Cast away from the Sunchime, Haille had not even a rope to throw Gunther's way, so he simply walked along the pier as Gunther stroked towards shore. He didn't stop at the shore, nor did Gunther turn towards home. Instead, he sloshed out of the shallows and walked down the beach in the opposite direction, his feet trailing in the surf. But Haille realized at that moment they had bigger problems on their hands. A crowd had gathered in a crescent around the end of the pier, watching the humiliation unfold. The faces were not without sympathy, but it was one face that Haille recognized that caused him to turn and run back to the bird and the baby. Haille bounded up the steps of the tavern, pushed aside the sailcloth curtain, and called out to Balthazar, who was wiping down the tables. Where is Chloe? Where is Val?
You look like you've seen a ghost, boy.
I need to find them right now.
Well, you are lucky. They both are out back practicing with those staffs of theirs.
Haille raced down the back hall, past the heat of the kitchen, where he glanced to see Cody sitting and talking to Misty as she stirred some stew over the fire. Whoa there, young man, Cody said, but Haille was already halfway down the hall, following the click-clack of the battle staffs. Val and Chloe were engaged in a furious sparring match, Chloe with her redwood staff, Val with his yew from the elves. Their jerkins were dotted with sweat, and the grass flattened beneath their feet from their own circling steps. Caitlin was keeping score with a piece of chalk and a slate tablet.
Chloe, a man named Brisby just took the sunshine from Gunther. Said he was late on payments.
Chloe stopped, her staff coming to a halt beside her, her hand making a fist.
Where is Gunther? At the shore. I'll show you. Let's go.
She started into the tavern house, but before Haille followed, he turned to Val.
Val, I think I saw Victor Twenge. What? At the docks, too. Victor Twenge? How could he have followed you?
Chloe asked from the steps, pulling on her cloak.
I never reckoned him crazy enough to follow us through the forest, but perhaps he did.
If he's about, it's best you stay here. Prince Haille, please take me to my husband. Chloe and Haille ran down to the quayside, pressing through a gathering crowd near the docks. Haille was grateful for it made hiding all the easier. The throngs had collected when a sail had appeared on the horizon, belonging to a ship of considerable size.
It can only mean it's the latest ship from Carith City, Chloe said, bringing goods to trade.
Or more refugees, but definitely news, she said, pulling the edges of her cloak down around her face.
Are you afraid of Victor Twenge?
Haille asked, taking 2 steps for every one of Chloe's.
He's no friend of the Order, and if he remembers Val, he'll remember me.
Haille pushed through the mass of people. In a small port, in a time of unrest, the arrival of a ship brought out the whole town. Longshoremen lined up for a chance to unload goods and make a day's wage. Market sellers wheeled their carts from the market square to the quayside. Women waited with expectant faces, while children climbed trees, stood atop pylons, and huddled in windowsills, anywhere they could get a peek at the going-ons. With such a crowd, the lone figure kneeling on the edge of the surf, his head dropped to his chest, seemed all the more lonely. As soon as Haille pointed Gunther out, Chloe overtook him, her steps throwing up rooster tails of sand. By the time Haille caught up, she was standing beside her husband, his head against her hips, his face wet with tears.
I have failed us, he wept.
You have not. You have been an upright man in a time of uncertainty.
I cannot even provide. Our debts have overcome us.
We still have the tavern.
How long?
He said, looking up to her, his eyes filmed over. He nodded at the ship now pulling up to dock. Its name, the Tamaram, was painted in red letters on its hull.
This is the first ship in weeks. They used to come every day. Our own clients can't pay us, except to run up their own debts.
We will find a way. We always have, she said, smoothing the hair on his head.
What? With my magic? I can't even succeed as a fisherman, much less a mage. What good were tricks and illusions when they tossed me from my own ship?
His voice caught.
My life is worth nothing but for you.
Don't say that, she said now, kneeling in the sand herself. You are the best man I have ever met, with a heart that brings light to my own.
Then what will we do?
We'll think of something. They remained in an embrace a long time, Gunther unbothered by the cold and his wet clothes. It was Chloe who finally suggested they return home, where they could change and sit by the fire. Haille followed, but at a distance, sensing that this was a sacrosanct time for husband and wife. Instead, he kept alert, looking for Twenge. The bounty hunter was not hard to find, for he moved through the crowd with a cadre of armed men. Some of them were the men that had accosted them in the ravine, but their numbers were fewer. Haille wondered if indeed Twenge had followed them through the forest, and if he had lost some men in the process. Haille ran to catch up with Chloe and Gunther. He moved against the flow in the street as the refugees were filtering down through the town to catch what news they could from the arrival of the Tamaram. Only a few evening patrons were not lured by the ship, and were already gathered around the tables eating bread and stew when Haille pushed through the sailcloth curtain into the warm dimness of the tavern. Gunther was already next to the fire, Misty helping him out of his sodden boots. Chloe was in the corner, her head lowered as she spoke to Balthazar. Val, Cody, and Caitlin were gathered around Gunther, their faces drawn.
"Did you see Victor?" Val asked. "Yes, it was him. He has some men with him, but not as many as before, Haille said.
Val clicked his tongue and rubbed the stubble on his cheeks. Gunther was shivering. Misty put a blanket around his shoulders and excused herself to get him some warm cider. Gunther explained to Val and Cody what had happened. Val listened with a faraway look in his eyes, as if he were already trying to plan an escape. When Gunther finished, Val opened his mouth to speak, but Chloe had stepped in between them.
Prepare your things, Val. You leave tomorrow. I understand.
He nodded, although he could not hide the look of disappointment on his face.
No, I don't think you do, Chloe said. We're coming with you.
Now it was Val's turn to look surprised, his brow furrowed.
But on what ship? They took the Sunshine. Don't be silly. The ship that just pulled into port, the Temaram. Surely it is not ours. We don't even know the captain. We don't have to. To steal it,